You are at a crowded event. You haven't touched a single drop of alcohol, but suddenly you hit a wall. You are experiencing what psychologists call an introvert hangover. A dense brain fog rolls in. Your limbs feel heavy. You become highly irritable, and suddenly all you can think about is finding an empty room and shutting the door. People frequently mistake this reaction for an emotional failing or a bad mood, but it is actually a hardwired physiological response to overstimulation. To understand exactly what is happening, we first have to separate introversion from a condition it gets confused with constantly: social anxiety. Social anxiety is driven by an intense fear of judgment, embarrassment, or rejection. It is a psychological hurdle where interacting with others feels inherently risky. Introversion has nothing to do with fear, and it has nothing to do with your social skills. It is simply a measure of how quickly interacting with other people drains your internal battery. You can be a highly confident, outgoing introvert and still experience a total system crash after a long night out. The exhaustion comes from your biology, not your nerves. The root of this exhaustion lies deep inside the brain's reward centers, specifically in how we process neurotransmitters. This model illustrates the divide. Extroverts run on a dopamine-heavy system. They actually require a large amount of external stimulation, like a loud, crowded room, to trigger a chemical rush and feel energized. But an introvert's brain is highly sensitive to dopamine. When you expose them to that exact same loud environment, their system will instantly overload. Instead, introverts rely on a different neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. This chemical makes us feel good when we engage in quiet internal reflection. Introverts don't necessarily hate socializing. They are simply running on a completely different chemical fuel source than the rest of the world. Up to 50% of the population shares this introverted biological trait. So why does the modern world constantly demand that we act like extroverts? Author Susan Cain traces this bias to a major cultural shift in the early 20th century, creating what she calls the extrovert ideal. Before this point, society operated on a culture of character, where people were valued for quiet morals and inner discipline. But that quickly gave way to a culture of personality. As massive businesses and dense urban centers began to dominate the economy, society started rewarding the loudest, most aggressive voice in the room. We built a systemic flaw into our culture. We started assuming that outward charisma and sheer volume were accurate indicators of actual competence. You see this flaw most clearly in the modern workplace, especially in how we choose our leaders. Researchers at the FIU Center for Leadership found a glaring paradox. Extroverts are overwhelmingly promoted because they look and act the part of a traditional boss, yet introverts often yield far better actual team performance. This chart compares team productivity based on leader personality. When managing proactive employees, introverted leaders significantly outperform extroverts by listening and keeping egos in check. But measuring perceived organizational support, introverted leaders score drastically lower. They feel completely isolated by the corporate system. Yet history is full of highly effective introverted leaders. Albert Einstein revolutionized our understanding of the universe through intense, isolated contemplation. Rosa Parks ignited the civil rights movement with a quiet, unwavering resolve that spoke louder than any grand speech. By forcing introverts to conform to a loud, extroverted corporate mold, we are actively damaging team performance and burning out some of our most effective leaders. Introverts do not need to be fixed. They just need to practice what psychologists call energy hygiene. This means intentionally building restorative niches into your day, finding moments of total solitude to let your dopamine threshold reset. It aligns with trait activation theory, a scientific principle which states that personality traits can only be successfully expressed when someone is placed in the correct environment. If we design workplaces and schools that honor quiet contemplation, rather than forcing pseudo-extroversion, we can stop wasting a colossal amount of human talent.